8:30, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. And I would ask for approval of the agenda. There's a couple things on there. Xavier won't be here, so Christina is going to present for him. I think that's it, actually.
Kyle,
Yes.
could we add under new business just a quick discussion about when we're going to meet and talk about the bond?
Yeah, make that item D. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, would entertain a motion? Thank you, James.
Second.
Thank you, Jody. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any more ayes? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Public comment. We have public comment at the beginning, at the end of all of our meetings. We do have some public here. Anybody want to? Thank you for being here. Okay, moving on. Item 4, approval of minutes from July 14, regular meeting. Anything to add to these, Christina? Okay.
Make the motion.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you, James. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried again. Thank you. Ramsdale Regional Center for the Arts banner presentation. Christina.
Yep, I put a couple of these around just for the board to look at. We asked Xavier to come up with examples of the things that he would put up. He asked to utilize the downtown post for these banners to kind of intermix. So we talked about having them start at US 31 and go to Division and then also in the park. So when I looked at that, we don't have enough pole holders to do like all of the poles. We probably can give him 8 spots, so he would use the version 1, which is the first page, have 4 of those. Version 2 have 2 of those, and version 3, 2 of those. So kind of intermix down River Street to kind of get that advertised for Christmas. So he wanted to see if the board approved, and then he did talk to the HDC, and he said once this board decided, then we're going to make that decision based on our approval.
Do we request installation, or does he request installation?
I assumed that we would do that, Kyle. Is there another, since I know that Brandon has done all this stuff on
Yeah.
social districts,
Yes.
but
Okay. We can
Probably
say
on
on
our,
that.
yeah, on our property, it'd be best if we had our.
Yeah. Okay.
okay. And then he just said, you know, he appreciates that we would consider this and that the ballet is a community-driven program by Ingrid Bond and is produced in collaboration with the Ramsdale. We feel it's important to take the opportunity to promote on River Street for this performance because it promotes our talented community of dancers and brings local and regional community together during this special weekend in Manistee.
Okay.
So,
Anybody have any comments or discussion? Are we for, against?
Four. Yeah.
Okay.
It looks good.
Okay. Does he want a consensus or a motion, or how do we want to do this?
I think he just would like an approval, so I
Okay.
don't know if we want a motion to allow the Ramsdale Regional Center of the Arts to put up 8 banners in the selected locations.
Is there any opposition? I think it's consensus, so.
Okay.
Good with that.
Great, I will let him know.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Moving on to item 6, approval of financials from the July 21st meeting. This is July 21st, July 2021, sorry.
Yes, there's nothing out of the ordinary in the financials. They're all budgeted items.
Okay.
So,
Any questions on this, anybody? Discussion? I would entertain a motion to approve. Thank you, Ed.
Second that.
Thank you, Karen. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thanks again. Approval of revised financials from June for the end of the year.
okay, do you want to do that before the expenses?
Oh, sorry, no.
Thank you.
I forgot we need to approve the expenses separately.
Yeah.
Approval of expenses in the amount of $10,913.03. These are all budgeted items.
Yes, the Communicraft would probably be the only one in question, which was the new pole holders that we ordered for the Riverwalk.
Okay.
I will make that motion that we accept the expenses of $10,913.03.
Second.
From Sharon, second from Jody. Thank you. Any discussion? None, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, thank you. Back to revised financials from June for the end of the year.
The accountants next year would like us to actually give them a month for the financials at the end of the year. So there was a couple of things that they needed to add with the new West Shore Community College lease. That's what you'll see in the prepaid expenses. So that'll be $2,500 that will come out every month. So that's why that line item is added. The other thing that we had was the Downtown Dollars Fund. There was an $1,800 outstanding bill from Jack Pine. They actually paid that. I sent that to the accounts, but we still had to write that $1,800 off into the financials. So that's where that additional money comes from. Other than that, there were just a couple expenditures for hops and props and sleigh bell that came in, but they were tangible items, so such as flyers, things like that, and billboards. And so they didn't put on like tents or anything like that, but that's why those items were here. So they'll probably just, with the way our fiscal is, it just happens to fall that way. So those were the expenses added. Other than that,
The Jack Pine was like something we overlooked.
no, it came in early for
Oh,
hops and props, so it's
sorry.
actually for hops and props this year, but it was billed in our last fiscal. But the way it falls with sleigh bell and hops and props, the accountants just thought it would all balance out, because next year, you know, we'll have the income in for the year.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
just timing.
Any discussion or questions for Christina?
So just to clarify, the city auditors are gonna be in the last week of August, first week of September doing field work, and they'll do the DDA audit at the same time.
Okay.
So Christina's aware of that, and I connected her with Ken Paulsmo from Anderson Packman, so hopefully it should take long. I think they normally come in for a half a day, and it's pretty straightforward.
Great.
Yeah, and we have touched base with them, and Krista was on the email from her executive people as well, so I'll be working with her.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Christina. I would entertain a motion to approve the revised financials.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, James.
Second. Go ahead.
Tamara's got it.
Yep.
Thanks, Tamara. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Back to you, Christina, Director's Report.
Okay. The first thing, we did a presentation for the DDA to City Council. I included the key highlights of the things that we had accomplished since the Chamber has taken over the Executive Director contract. I think the presentation went well. Again, I haven't heard anything or any other questions, but I left them that they can contact me or any of the board should they have more. Work has started on the website, so there are changes. The website has a lot of different pages with much information, so I'm trying to streamline it as much as I can and put drop downs and things like that and not repeat information as we go, but it will be kind of a work in progress.
Are you doing that work?
I have been doing
Okay.
that, yes. So I wanted to let you know that we're trying to make it more functional. I'm not sure that's the right platform moving forward. It isn't very user friendly,
Okay.
but
I'm gonna sit down with Christina and the business partners there.
Great. Okay.
We talked about it a little bit.
Okay.
And race mode this week.
great, thanks, James, I really, really appreciate that. Again, working on the annual audit and the bond moving forward, as the board decides. And then there have been new sleigh bell chairs. It will be Janet Dushan and Julia Cook.
Co-chairs.
Co-chairs,
Okay.
yeah. And so they had their first meeting last week, and then there will be another meeting next week.
Okay.
So,
Are those regularly scheduled meetings?
yes, they were either first Wednesday of the month. They happen at the Painted Lady at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
This one is a special one on the 18th. We didn't have very many participants in the last meeting, and you can get more from, chair updates or
Yeah.
point
If
updates.
maybe you could send out the regular meeting dates to the board, just if anybody else wants to, know what's going on and help out, that'd be nice. Thank you.
That would be great. Moving on.
Can I just have a quick question, please? Is this a possibility of getting, like, putting in the News Advocate or putting on some sort of social media, just so that the town is aware of the stuff that the DDAs and the chamber is doing for the
Okay.
community?
Yeah, and maybe we could do an article or something around that. Let me see what I can come up with, Jody, and I'll be happy to attempt on that.
And when you get that, send it to Kelly and she can put it on the city's site as well.
Okay, all right. I mean, this is available, but I don't know that this explains everything in detail. It's kind of key highlights.
Probably not, but I think the town should be aware that the dining platforms look fantastic, and that was an initiative of the chamber and the DDA.
Right.
Thanks, Jody.
We'll work on that. Anything else before I move on? Merchant meeting, there was not a merchant meeting in July, just due to everybody being very busy. Merchants are reporting business is very good this summer. The next meeting will be next week, Tuesday, August 17th, so we can kind of check in on sidewalk sales, which is this weekend. So sidewalk sales will be Friday and Saturday. And then, of course, the pier on Saturday as well. So I expect a very busy downtown for the weekend. That's what I have on merchants. Any questions on that one? Okay. Economic development, Mark gave me a couple updates. The downtown gateway project, the chamber has set up meetings with the developers and MDOT, as well as the participating in project meetings, and assistance was provided for communication at the site. So that is moving forward. For Cano's Manistee River, work advanced on the land sale of the deck and anticipating a fall opening.
Does he, there's been some complaints about the dumpster sitting out front. Is that,
Karen, Mark's actually gonna be meeting with him this week on that, so yeah,
It's
he's,
good to know. I was gonna bring that up.
yeah, he's very aware of that, and he's coming into town this week, so Mark will be meeting with him. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, if you saw stuff going in it, I guess you'd be a little more. Okay.
Food truck development, work has been continued on potential food truck park or a destination as an entertainment type venue within the DDA. So not confirmed yet, but the work is still continuing. The river water development, the chamber learned that the application from the funding for the workplace and senior housing in downtown did not receive funding. So that right now is not moving forward.
Is that separate? So, Whitmer announced $100 million going into housing. Was that not going to be flowed through Mishna?
This was a MSHDA application.
Right. But the $100 million that she announced.
There's some other target areas for her stuff. Yeah. Yeah, MISHDA has its funding, but also too, MISHDA does this whole plan thing where they check it all off to see that if you meet all the qualifications. And sometimes Manistee, and we've talked with the governor's representative not too long ago about, sometimes these guidelines that they have aren't really helpful to rural areas because, we don't have a streetscape everywhere. We don't have this and have that typically in rural Michigan. So I imagine some of that application that they did, which they'll probably go back and tweak it on.
Yeah,
I would
that'll
imagine.
be a second round,
Yeah.
maybe even a third round.
Yeah.
I think our challenge is the walkability score. Like, we have a decent one, but we can't compete with larger communities. And that's where the advocacy work that we're doing, we're constantly, talking to Mishda about their QAP and being looking at rural areas to try to see how we can step ahead a little bit with the scoring for the walkability. It's just challenging because we don't have a pharmacy right downtown, and those are some things they look at. So we're constantly in their ear, but we need to maybe get a little louder.
So river water is not dead, but, because the last time I spoke with Mark, it wasn't going to go without the Mishna funding.
I kind of suspect, I know that Oceana group, and, they might just sit back and kind of reevaluate. They just don't give up that hopefully they don't come up.
I think it's actually a good opportunity to maybe send a letter to Lansing, just as another thing to say, hey, we had a potential good project, but again, we can't score high enough in our rural communities, so can, we really need to address this, so.
Somebody was just in the paper talking about housing.
There's several initiatives. Yeah, we have housing, we have homelessness, which is one initiative. We have housing insecurity, which is the next term, and then we have workforce housing needs. So we have like a 3-tier issue going on with housing in Manistee County, but it's pretty much in any rural Michigan area. Maybe that letter can come from the DDA and kind of put together our thoughts about, here we are, we're concerned that this project is it was in our district, so maybe Kitty, is it Kitty? Yeah, maybe, talk to Kitty and see if that can help. And we can send a copy, we'll send it to Gov and then send it to Hillary. Yes. You need any help?
Thank you. Anything else on that? Okay, the downtown commercial space survey has received about 11 responses. Mark has been getting out to everybody. Some are choosing not to fill it out, but it is helping us collect that data of obstacles, what's available, what the future goals for the property are and such. So we're still moving forward on that continuously. Tracy Judkins at the ice cream shop is planning a soft opening this Saturday.
And what's that location?
That would be the old senior center at the end of River Street before Pine. Mark has been working with Tracy, helping her, and there's also a tenant on site, which is Alyssa Saylor, who's a photographer. So they'll be co-located within the building. So, and then the downtown economic development contacts for the month of July was 61. So there's a lot of interest in downtown.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of people that are just coming out of the woodwork wanting to open a business or purchase a property. So it's really exciting to finally see that momentum coming into the downtown. So I think the DDA has played a huge role in that with kind of some of the upgrades of social districts and the vibrancy of downtown. So we're excited to start fielding those calls and getting people in buildings and beautifying River Street. So.
I have to say too, I think it's like our is it Manistee Proud? Manistee Proud, is that what it comes? Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of publicity too, and a lot of like the before and after pictures are really, really on hitting social media, and it just looks so good. I can see where people are like getting excited, interested. So, hats off to that group for making it so apparent that we have a great downtown. Yeah, I know you're doing a lot of work, but it's like it's good. Even bad advertising is good advertising. You're out there and it's showing, that we're making a difference, and it really pushes that. The downtown certainly is something. It's the heartbeat of our community, so people love it. So it's showing that volunteerism is a good thing. So kudos, everybody that works on it.
Absolutely.
It's a community effort. It's a work effort with the DPW and the DDA, Chamber, and everybody else. So.
Okay. Anything else, Christina?
No, that's all I have for that.
Thank you for all that. Moving on to old business, food truck city ordinance, Christina and Ed.
And I just wanted to, I know Mark gave a little bit of an update that you guys had talked about special events such as House of Hops and Forest Festival. My concern for downtown on the food ordinance, the food truck ordinance, the way the city ordinance, the way it sits, is that the one day, say Ideal Kitchen or the Outpost wants to have a food truck for a 4-hour period for an anniversary. The ordinance doesn't allow for that, and if they don't do a special event request, those then have to go to council. Isn't there any way that those one day, special events that are happening within the downtown businesses could come back through the DDA as a street vendor permit?
Potentially, we just need to revise the ordinance. So and there's probably miscommunication. I thought the DDA was going to propose some suggestions, and then we could work it through the ordinance with George and then get it in front of council.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
So-
Heather and I had talked about it differently, that she said she
Okay.
would send it to me, that someone was working on it, so,
So
okay,
I
can work
we
on
need to
that.
make sure that it's going to meet the DDA's needs, but that we can square it with what the city's stuff is, and then we can get it through the process. process, so you and I should probably just style it offline and figure that out.
Great.
Yep.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I just want to make it as easy as we can for the merchants to take care of
Sure.
that, and also for the city of Manistee.
Great,
Thank you.
thanks, Ed. Moving on to new business, Hops and Props liquor license, Christina.
The board to approve for the DDA to go out and apply for a liquor license for Hops and Props on September 18th. So,
Saturday, September 18th, one-day
yep.
license.
Yeah.
I'd make that motion.
Thank you, James.
Second.
Thanks, Jody. Any discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Fall decor.
Thoughts are to, I know we've discussed the mums at the design committee. No one really thought that there was any bang for the buck, so to speak, because the petunias are so pretty. I wanted to bring it to the board to ask if we could leave the petunias up as long as possible. I think sometimes they've been taken down close to Labor Day. I did talk to Jeff, he said, Jeff McCullough, and he did say that they do try and leave them up until they look scraggly, I guess would be the best word for that. I wanted to make sure the board was okay with that, or do we want to look at fall decor? Should I look at corn stalks or something like that? And then we would have to get those put up and things, I just kind of wanted the board's feeling about fall. I think right around Christmas or Thanksgiving time is when the winter decor goes up, the holiday decor. Do we need something in between?
I'd be in favor of not having mums because I think they look scraggly, so.
I don't think you really see them.
No.
They're just too high.
It's not a good hanging plant, but, and obviously leave it up to whatever they are as long as possible.
Okay.
That's
The
just
current
my
method.
opinion.
I agree with that too. I don't know necessarily if corn stalks are a good idea.
They're probably messy.
Yeah, if you get a windstorm or something, then just,
Yeah, one's left hanging there.
yeah, or half of downtown fixes it, the other half doesn't, so.
They could put out a bunch of burn barrels.
Yeah.
And I brought this one up.
And in the future, it's even to think about our baskets, it's like you can put some petunias in there, but put the ivies in there, maybe,
Okay, add ivy next year to the petunias?
Well, not only ivy, but you can put like potato, like it's a yellowish green, and,
Like a
just.
potato vine, yeah.
Yeah, potato vine, put those in there, and that way, when the petunias start to go off, then the ivies will take over, and you can keep those up for.
I think you plant people need to get together.
Yeah, I'm like, somebody needs to advise me how this plant
That
works.
sounds nice.
Just gotta have a little green, then a little yellow green, and then that'll bloom a little bit more when the petunias die off, so they can have color. It's a good idea for fall.
You two are just promoting.
Yeah. I now know who I will send my emails to. I will talk to Macy's about that for next year. That's a great idea.
Is that enough direction?
That's great.
Okay. Anything else on fall decor?
No.
All right, moving on to item C, city services agreement. Ed Bradford and the board. We all have a copy of the city services agreement. How do we want to start this, Ed?
So I asked Jeff and Brandon to be here for a couple of reasons. One, Jeff was involved in the discussion when this agreement was adopted, as was Karen, involved with it, and a number of other people, myself included. Brandon's here because, he's kind of part of the day-to-day maintenance of the downtown, kind of making sure that stuff happens. So at the last meeting, there was a lot of discussion about expectations and how things were looking and that sort of thing. And I just think it's important for this board, a lot of the members who don't have the institutional knowledge and history of how this agreement has evolved, to understand that, and then to actually take a look at some of the sections of this agreement and understand the mechanisms to provide feedback so that the city can try to align the board's expectations with what the city thinks the agreement requires, and then find areas of agreement, disagreement, what have you. I also included in here a list of the items that were accomplished based on a DDA walkthrough earlier in the spring. And I think, roughly 90% of those, 80 to 90% of those have been accomplished. So that's the last page of the packet that Christina sent out. So I think it's important to know that the DDA has had input as to what they wanted done, and the DPW has been able to accomplish a lot of that. There was extensive discussion at the city council meeting last night about the Riverwalk and what the maintenance plan is moving forward and what the enhancement plans are. And so there's no doubt that that's going to get more attention in the upcoming budget. There's some projects that are going to happen that will help with that. But the contract with the DDA extends beyond the Riverwalk. It's the whole DDA. It's the parking lot. It's all of the services that the city provides during the winter months, the cleanup, the pavers, all that sort of thing. So I think it's just important to review this agreement to kind of understand if there's areas of concern, they can be brought up. Jeff is here to be able to help address those. Another thing to keep in mind is this agreement is the outcome of a number of other failed agreements over time, starting back when John Rose was the community development director. And there was discussions, and Travis Alden was the director, even Patrick Kay was here. And so this is the culmination of a number of different iterations of agreement. And also the DDA and the city have done several different ways of maintaining, particularly the Riverwalk or the downtown. We've had contractors do it. We've had people dedicated to the Riverwalk doing it prior to that. In both of those instances, when we dedicated 2 people to it, there was a feeling that it wasn't being done well enough. So then the DDA switched over to having a contractor doing it. And then, again, there wasn't a high enough level for the expectation. So that started to become cost prohibitive. So then that, I think, helped prompt the conversation back with the city on can the city maybe do it at a more economical cost and still meet the expectations. And we're here today, and there's still expectations in the community that aren't potentially being met. So we just need to figure out what the path forward is. I think there'll be more resources devoted to the Riverwalk in future budgets. We're going to have conversations about an asset management plan and a maintenance plan to actually find out what it's going to take to maintain and renovate the Riverwalk, because there are some areas that are going to require some major work on it. So it's just kind of an open-ended discussion, but I think it's important to understand that the service agreement was premised on the fact that this has to be a collaborative effort. And nobody, whether it's the DDA or the city council or the Manistee crowd or the DPW, can work in a vacuum. They have to work collaboratively, they have to communicate, and they have to make sure we're all rowing in the same direction. And I think recently we haven't all necessarily been rowing in the same direction because I don't think the expectation levels have been established. So that's the reason I wanted to put this on, bring the agreement back up, be able to discuss it if there are any concerns. I'd like Jeff and Brandon to give a little bit of a discussion about their maintenance efforts in the downtown in general, but also specifically on the Riverwalk. Kind of maybe go through that list as well.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Any questions for Ed with that?
I have a lot of discussion, but I think to start with, maybe Jeff and Brandon, that'd be great. Brandon, I don't know if you want.
Pleasure to meet you. I'm Brandon Quinn for the Public Works.
Thanks for being here, guys, and just feel free to be a part of this and jump in any time. Do you want to take it now?
What would you like to know?
Well, did you have anything to present, or?
Not necessarily.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on
The same conversations that we've had in, excuse me, in the design committee, I guess I just can reiterate, there's a lot of these topics that seem to come full circle. And we always joke in those we used to joke in those monthly meetings that there's a lot of those things that seems like every 5-6 years that come back around as a hot topic. I didn't realize until speaking with Brandon last week, the week before, that the city actually, prompted by the DDA, used to have 2 summer employees that didn't even report at the Public Works, they reported to the Marina building. Do you remember how long ago that was?
It would have been within 15 to 17 years.
So,
Give, take.
and that's all they did. That's all they did was work on the Riverwalk. And Brandon, one of the reasons why Brandon came is because he's got a lot more history with it. But after a number of years, that wasn't acceptable. Expectations weren't being met. So, like Ed mentioned, then the DDA went out and contracted for the landscaping services. And I came in at the tail end of that process when Patrick Kay was the director, and remember conversations where he said, man, year one was great, everybody was happy and the price was acceptable, and but then year two, the price went up and the performance went down, and so the more the DDA pushed for compliance with what they wanted, the higher the cost went, and then at some point, the DDA reached out to us and said, you know, we're up to $24,000 a year, we just can't do this anymore, would you guys be willing to take it on? I sat down with our parks lead man and said, what would it take for us to do that work? And we determined that dedicating people to it was not going to be efficient, because about 80% of the work that happens before Memorial Day. It's the big spring cleanup, it's getting the mulch out, it's trimming stuff, cleaning up the leaves and everything. So basically what it boiled down to was we decided that if we hired 2 more seasonal employees, and then you know, we could put a big push on it in the spring, those seasonal employees could then do the regular weekly stuff, but then they would be kind of absorbed into the rest of the Parks Department. And so that and the cost of just purchasing the mulch was just about $16,000, $17,000 of our cost. So I think at that time we actually put together a contract and that the DDA signed, and it was, I didn't look it up, but I think it was about $18,000 or so. And so we operated with that for a couple of years, and then this current agreement got formed. And so the one thing I want to point out in the city DDA agreement, that dollar amount is not just for the maintenance aspect. It covers a whole lot of different things, but I think that baseline was $18,000 that was devoted to the maintenance of the Riverwalk and the rest of the downtown areas. So Kyle's very aware. I'll tell you, Kyle's been a critic consistently every year, every meeting, and I actually give him credit for that, because I think he keeps pushing and striving to be better and never accept, you know, even when we're doing good, keep pushing it further. But they've been doing the design committee, and Mickey and then I've attended a couple of those, have done walkthroughs in the spring and then periodically through the summer. When we took that over, it was pretty clear that there was a lot of neglect, if you will, or deferred maintenance, to put it kindly. And there was a lot of the items that just hadn't been dealt with. And so that committee started creating a list and then started prioritizing bigger projects. So at least, Kyle, maybe you can expand on this, but at least the last 3 years, I know that we've taken on some bigger chunks. There was a bunch of shrubbery removal along the Riverwalk, a lot of tree trimming that happened. This summer was hitting the parking lots, or we do that last year too?
Both.
We actually, I addressed this to City Council last week, but we actually have one of our summer employees that is a former landscaper, and I work for a landscape company, so he's pretty responsible, pretty talented, and so we've kind of made him our focused on the DDA. He's not there 100% of the time, but he's been down in this area. So that's kind of what we're doing. Certainly the Riverwalk is getting all the attention, but the work that we're doing is obviously more than just that.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. That was excellent. That was a great history. There were a lot of important things in what you said, and it was an excellent, introduction. I don't want us to pass over this, the maintenance plan, asset management plan, without giving that some attention. That's really critical and building that out into a whole maintenance plan, that's a participatory document where, you know, not only DPW and DDA and City Council, but also, you know, groups like Manistee Proud weigh into that. Because, you know, I can tell you, I can walk up and down and not see stuff. I'm like the last person. I didn't know there were invasive species down there until Kelly, you know, practically pointed it out to me. I don't see this stuff. And when you have one group that's doing anything, you know, over time, stuff gets missed. So, you know, participating in coming up with the, you know, the asset management plan and the maintenance plan, I think is critical. Could I ask you, Kelly, there was a number that I saw someplace, maybe you gave it to me or the newspapers did. It was at 400 hours, 400, getting close to 500 hours volunteer work. I would bet, do you know where it is now? Okay. That's a big gap. That's, you know, that's a big gap, and we should keep that in mind when planning level of effort. But, you know, I think this is we need to set up a structure that accommodates, you know, a bunch of different groups playing into this.
Thanks, Bruce. I think my biggest issue really consistently goes back to funding. And I don't believe that DDAs were created to fund maintenance, and it's a slippery slope, and we've been on this slippery slope for, you know, 10, 12 plus years, and now we're up to $65,000 a year, which is a significant portion of our budget, and that's not what, in my opinion, what I've read legislatively, not what the DDA is designed to do. It's not building assets, and it's not promoting economic growth. So I just want to put that out there because I feel very strongly about that. I was in the room, it was the former 2 city managers ago, Mitch Deitch, that came to the DDA and said, hey, we think we can do this, why don't you let us bid on this? And so we didn't, I don't think it matters, but I do want to set the record straight. We didn't come to the city and ask them for help. Mitch asked us, hey, we can do this. But I don't want this to become an us and them. And it's hard not to when we disagree on the level of the standards of what it should be at. And I think that's one of the biggest issues we're dealing with here is where I and some other people feel like where the landscaping should be at. And, you know, so we get into this, you know, basic and enhanced, and it's, and we can talk about basic and enhanced all day long and try to define what's what and what's normal city work and what's not. I'm not sure where we get at the end of the day with that. And I do think there was a lot of work put into the contract, but like Ed said, we gotta review it. But those are just some of the things that come top of mind to me. I don't see the DDA being able to effectively do what we should be doing if we're spending that amount of money plus on maintenance. And it's more than that. This is just $65,000, but now we're being asked to, you know, reset pavers to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars for pavers that are over 20 years old to reset sinking pavers, and that's just going to completely gut our budget. And now we're talking about, you know, including some of those things in a bond. So
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and as said, I was part of this discussion, and a little bit of this was a real, it wasn't, we worked on it for quite some time, but there was also some pressure in regards to get things wrapped up for our TIF plan. But you know, I have my old notes and I have my current notes, you know, and if you look in the contract, it clearly does state that improvements and you know, development, basically these things that are happening down there become the city property, become the property of the city once after the development is completed. The Riverwalk is the city's. DDA is asking for beautification and probably, well, supportive beautification and sustaining some sort of level of security and safety for people while they're on that riverwalk. The maintenance, I keep going back, and I have it all in my notes here. Maintenance, we kept, I know that we probably spent one whole meeting trying to find maintenance, but my opinion is maintenance means the city is responsible for the care, the uptake, the consistent and safe utilization of all the things that we have built in the DDA. And bathrooms was another half-a-day discussion. Bathrooms aren't the DDA's. DDA might have helped the city build a bathroom down here, but you know, this number sticks in my head because I was like, I'm ready to quit my job and do this as a part-time job. $40,000 you were paying for maintaining two sets of bathrooms, and it's like $40,000. I'll do that. I mean, I can't. But that was DDA. You know, you're saying we should pay that. And I'm like, what? Why? Those are city bathrooms, aren't they? Because part of my conversation was if they're the DDA's bathroom, I'm going to lock them at 7 o'clock at night.
So Kyle and Karen, can I interject? I mean, I think this is one of the fundamental discussion points that we've been having for the last decade.
Yeah.
And it's a point of disagreement, and we've got to get beyond it. But there's a but-for argument here. These assets were created by taxes that were captured by the DDA and turned into infrastructure, which then becomes the property of the city. But for the DDA capturing those taxes, these investments wouldn't have happened. The city wasn't going to build downtown restrooms on its own, and the city probably wasn't necessarily going to do the level of the Riverwalk, because these are things, the pavers, same thing, streetscape, DDA participated, those sorts of things. So when the DDA builds these assets, yes, because of the way the statutes are, they become the property of the city. But in order to maintain those assets, which are at a higher level than what the city would otherwise do, and it's a higher level than what they do throughout the rest of the community, there's a natural inclination to say, okay, some of these taxes that would otherwise be going to maintain those assets, which the DDA is using for other purposes, should reasonably go towards some level of higher level of maintenance. And that's the discussion that we can't seem to get past, as to whether that's the case or not. So this $65,000, I can tell you, Karen, you're part of this conversation, we penciled out several times how much money that the city is spending in the downtown district above and beyond what it normally would do. And it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's a basis for where we kind of settled at 65. And you know, nobody was happy with that, but everybody could live with that. You know, we wanted it more, the city did, the DDA wanted it less. This is what we arrived at through good faith negotiations over 15, 16 months. And there's mechanisms within this agreement to walk through, to have to provide feedback, to have discussions. And you know what, this was signed January 2020, so COVID basically hit 3 months later. So we've had 12, 15 months of not normal, I would say, in terms of activities, disruption, people in town. So I think it's natural that now when things are starting to get back to normal, we're able to have these discussions. But that's been a sticking point in these agreements for the last 10 years, and we have to get past that. We have to get past that. I think the city is comfortable with what we have in the agreement. If there's things that need to be addressed that aren't being met to the expectations, then we need to talk through that and decide, okay, how can that be done economically and what resources need to be committed to it. I think at the end of this conversation, we do need to have a little bit of a forward-looking discussion about what projects are on the horizon and how that's going to impact the Riverwalk, because there is going to be some positive developments because of that. But you know, this seems to be a fundamental point that comes up over and over and over again. It's like Jeff's conversation about we keep circling and we keep coming back to it. And until we can get past that, I think we're going to struggle with trying to move this forward and make positive progress.
I think we keep coming back to the DDA wanted this, and the city works part, or the city operational part, it feels like, well, we didn't want that. However, I think that our city council had to approve it, right? Anything that the DDA did. So the majority and the community representatives voted that this Riverwalk would happen. You know, that all of the stuff that happened in the DDA area was appropriate. And it just feels like this, like, well, we didn't want that, but we're stuck with it. You know, it's like, I understand that, I get it. However, at the same time, we're not ripping it up. So we need to adjust to, You know, it is. It may be $100,000 more than what you expect to pay. So how are we gonna make that? How are we gonna get to that? And it just feels like this constant struggle about, well, you know, we didn't approve that, or we didn't want that, and that's just caused us
So
extra.
Karen, I don't think it's a matter of the city didn't want it or we didn't approve it. The infrastructure's there and it's beautiful and it needs to be taken care of, but a lot of that infrastructure is 30 or 40 years old. So wood has a finite lifespan, no matter how well you stain and seal it and anything like that. So I think that's a little bit of a mischaracterization. It's not that the city doesn't want it. The reality is there's assets and infrastructure that are there that require maintenance, that are costing more money, that the city isn't getting the benefit of the taxes to help maintain that. So we've got to come up with a solution to maintain it at an acceptable level. And it's aging, and there's sections of it that are deteriorating, and there's probably sections of it that need reconstruction. How do we come up with a plan that's going to make that all happen? And make that so that everybody can say, yep, that's the best river walk in the state of Michigan. Because I think that's what people want. We want it to be something that, you know, has a wow effect. But we're not devoting enough resources to it right now to be able to do that. And Nick Shermansky last night at the council meeting made that very clear. It's like, we've changed course in the middle of a budget cycle, and we've not provided resources to be able to do that. So as part of the next budget thing, council wants to reprioritize resources, then that's what council will do, and then more work can get done. But the focus, frankly, at the council level has been streets, 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 streets. And city administration can turn the ship, but I can't turn a freighter around in this channel. So if the new focus is going to be on the Riverwalk, then we can make that happen, but it's going to come at the cost of other things, which is fine, because it's all a prioritization process. You know, the circle of money is this big. That pie's not grown. In fact, the city had a heavily rollback last year, which shrinks the amount of money that we were expecting to get in by about $50,000. So it's a matter of prioritization. It's got to be a collaborative process. City council has to weigh in, DDA has to set priorities, community has to set priorities. Give us those marching orders, set the expectations, and the city can execute. The city executes really well when we have a clear thing. But when we have shifting expectations that come up in the middle of budgets, middle of processes, it's a little bit tough to react. And so we just have to make sure that, you know, we have a plan moving forward and we can execute on it. And that's what's going to happen.
I have a question. Just looking at the agreement under infrastructure, I mean, it says the city owns the infrastructure in downtown, whether paid for by the city or the DDA. And the city is responsible for the repair and maintenance, and then in practice, the city takes over the assets developed by the DDA and incorporates them into the maintenance and asset management plans.
That's absolutely correct.
So I guess to help me understand, I mean, to me, it's pretty clear in the agreement. So the city should have that already in their asset management plans on how to continue to maintain that without coming back to the DDA for funding.
Well, we're not coming back to the DDA for funding. We're agreeing on what we're doing here. And there's items in here that, if you look at the whole agreement, you can't take sections out of context on this in terms of accelerated maintenance, and it specifically mentions pavers and things like that. The city has maintained those things. For example, we replaced all the crosswalks at city expense, $5,000 a piece because they were crumbling. Didn't ask the DDA to pay for that. So now if there's pavers that are a problem, and the city knows that they're a problem, and they're on the list to pay for that, the DDA wants to see it happen faster than we can work it in our budget, that's where that comes in this agreement. So it's a collaborative conversation about what are the priorities, what are the funding resources. The city doesn't want to hamstring the DDA, doesn't want to do that. You know, we want the downtown to thrive, but we've got to have a balance here. And I think that's what this agreement, after 18 months of negotiation on 2 other agreements that didn't work so well, I thought we got to a point where we could make this work, but I don't think we've executed on the provisions in here that allow for the review of that, the discussion about it. I mean, this is probably the first discussion that this board has had about this agreement and the level of expectations that are there. And that's good, we need to have that discussion.
I just think it needs to be more detailed and more accountability because it does list like the Riverwalk in the infrastructure. And so I'm glad to see the city is looking at an asset management plan for that because I think that's needed. So
one of the things that happened, and Karen will remember during all those conversations with this agreement, is we started off getting very detailed, and it was decided that it was too much detail and it needed to be more broad. And the problem, one of the problems that I saw with being detailed is if we listed out every single thing that we did, then when we were asked to do something different, then how do you handle that? Does that mean when the social district pops up and we've got to put stickers out and banners out, do we have to then provide a price to do that? And we didn't want to get into that. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that's why that was a little bit broad. And another thing that was brought up that I have to mention, last year we didn't perform at all anywhere. During COVID, we had reduced work hours. We had to split all our departments up into 2 separate shifts. And so not just the downtown, not just the Riverwalk, but the entire park system, our street programs, nothing was done to our expectations. And certainly we heard that from the community. Last year was an anomaly, and I'm not trying to make excuses but that is a real aspect.
And so, Stacy, I guess to your point, this agreement was intentionally designed to foster this kind of a dialogue, and we can get into specifics about where maybe expectations are aligned. But this was intentionally done big, because when you start listing out all the detailed stuff that you wanted, or that is wanted, that was done with the contractor for the landscape when we had it, that cost ballooned to the point that the DDA said, hey, we can't afford that anymore. So it's this balancing act. But again, in the big picture, I think moving forward, City Council is going to dedicate more resources to maintaining this. I have no doubt about that, because it's become a community priority, and that's fine. That's how it should work. If the community wants to see it fixed, then council needs to react to that and dedicate more resources to it.
I think also for history, Cameron, you and I are probably the ones that are, pretty longer members here. But, even the DDA itself had some difficulties in regards to being able to manage, keeping a consistent person in charge who could, be that point person who could walk the Riverwalk and do all this stuff. And I think that the whole contracted services has really been helpful in regards to bringing the DDA to more of an interactive and more aggressive in regards to just process and not policy, but process stuff. So I think that historically that changed, and so I think that is probably why we're at this a little bit more too. Just like, we wanted to be more assertive towards what's going on in the downtown district and kind of have that oversight and have somebody, that our current contract has some very qualified people being able to kind of deal with this. But now we're also, there's that accountability. Things like, so can we have the plan for the assets in downtown? What is the repair, timeline? What is the replacement needs? Those type of things. I know I have not seen that in the DDA. If there is a plan, and I brought this up to you several times, the handicap accessible area down on the Riverwalk, all the boards are, it's coming apart. So that I've looked at that for 2 years. So is it on plan? Are we going to do something with that? I think that would be very helpful if the city would publish that or bring that here, so that we have an idea about what are going to be the maintenance needs. And, I talked about the hole in the sidewalk over here in the marina area. That I walk the Riverwalk every day, so it's like, and I'm trying to understand too. I know that we have shortage problems of supplies. It's difficult to get things fixed and get materials all the time, but it's like when a project started, it would, I guess I'd like to know, well, is that on the list? Is it not on the list? I see that the weeds were pulled at that butterfly thing, but I haven't checked this in the last 2 weeks if the pole has been, one that rotted and fell over, if that's been fixed. I don't know. So it's like, maybe an updated idea of what's going on would be great to bring to the DDA, so that we wouldn't be like, well, is this ever going to get done? Because my priority is going to be totally different than your priority, because you've got 15 other bigger things, and I'm going, well, I really hate those weeds. So if we knew, if there was better communication about what you want to do, it's not that we want to second guess it, but maybe if we see something that's potentially very dangerous for our tourism time, you know, we could negotiate on it. It could be an open process. And we talked a little bit about that when we started the, you know, basic services versus advanced, and I get the critical stuff, I get it. If, you know, if the fountain blew over tomorrow, you know, that goes to the top of the list and everything else has to stop, you know, and that's a critical thing that we would be involved in, because it's really not something that's, I mean, you can put it back up and not run it, but then we'd be down there going, why isn't it running, you know? So just this communication piece, I think, has been a difficulty. I think having a list, knowing what's out there. I said something about putting the paver stuff under our ideas about bond, only because I think it's a huge problem throughout Manistee. I was not a fan when they put those in. I was a property owner downtown, and I was like, I don't like those. But we got to fix a big problem now. And what my idea is today, you know, maybe somebody will be sitting in this chair 10 years from now going, what was she thinking, you know? So we're doing the best we can, but if we have the knowledge and the communication of what, you know, there might not have been, you weren't around when they put the papers in, Jeff, you know, you weren't in charge. Maybe, you know, you would have went, that's not a very good idea.
I was part of the design team, actually.
Okay. Well,
but not the landscape architect.
Right. So those things are important.
I think you're absolutely correct, and I think in the agreement, section 6, it says the DDA shall periodically meet with the city to complete walkthroughs of the downtown and to review how the services are being provided. So I think that is the basis for having these conversations. So what I would hope would come out of today is that we set up a mechanism where Jeff and Brandon and whoever else needs to be involved, if it's the city engineer, can maybe make, with a subcommittee of the DDA board, do those walkthroughs and maybe do them monthly. And we did, the last time we did it was back in the spring. So that way, that in and of itself is going to foster better communication. It's going to help to align expectations. It's going to educate both sides as to what community concerns are, what limitations for the city are in terms of doing that. And help to build out that list, just like happened back in the spring where, you know, Jeff's completed a lot of it. To me, that is how this should happen and should be working.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly don't want to be criticized for the work that we do. We want to try to meet expectations. And we make those adjustments on a daily basis in every department in all 15 of our parks. So obviously the last 3-4 months, it's been Riverwalk. I mean, we're getting pounded on every day about that. We've had individual people express their opinions. We've had individual people express their concerns, but we manage off of the. We try to manage, and it trickles down through our kind of our command, but which is you know, when the wheels are squeaky, we can't just run because a resident has an opinion on something. But when I start to hear 2, 3, 4, okay, we probably have an issue. We need to go look and we need to go address it. We did a little different walkthrough this spring than I think. I mean, I didn't participate in those spring walkthroughs before and wanted to get involved. I wanted Brandon to write down everything. And we had I thought, some really good conversations and set some expectations. The butterfly garden, that's been adopted by a volunteer group
Jeff down there all the time.
for what, at least 10 years, 12 years. They disappeared. And it's not like they call and say, hey, we're not going to do it anymore. They just disappear, and then all of a sudden it gets overgrown, and maybe there's a post that falls over, and so now we got to deal with that. We had conversations about pull all the shrubs out, and I said, well, before we do that, let me get through, you know, the summer. We can pull them out, but I think we need to have a plan on what to put back in there. We did a lot of that along the Riverwalk, down behind Manistee and the marina, where we pulled everything out. Now it's just mulch, but it's kind of barren now. So I think, like Ed said, and I agree with your last statements, Karen, we have to work together on this. We have to have collaboration. I mean, I've joked with my guys, I'll make it sparkle and shine I just need to know what the level of expectations, and then I have to be funded for it. So, you know, scrubbing all the wood like Kelly and her volunteers are doing, that was not on our radar screen. It used to be faster and easier when you can power wash it, and we used to have summer kids that did it. We can't do that anymore. But if the community expectation is, nope, you need to scrub that every year, every 2 years, whatever that is, then I'll plan on that. I'll put that in my budget requests, and then it goes through, well, Ed always takes a red pen to it, but it goes to the city manager. The city manager's responsibility is to take all those department requests, put them together, and make sure that that budget balances before they give it to city council. So there's a lot of work that happens on that budget that nobody's ever aware of, because there's a lot of that stuff that has to be cut because it's got to balance before it even goes to city council. When it goes to city council and we have public input, Mr. Grabowski, I think you would agree, the public doesn't show up. They don't show up to say we need to do this, or we need a priority, or budget more for that. There's hardly any discussions during those budget processes, and it bums me out, because then here we are 1 month into our budget, and now we're getting lots of input, but we're kind of handicapped to make a big change at this point.
Well, and I think that, you know, again, I truly understand what budget, you know, how that all goes around. I manage 3 facilities, you know, so I have to understand what my budget is, I have to understand what my fund line is, but I also have to look at those facilities with not just a budget glasses, but with, especially here in downtown, with kind of like tourism glasses. And we have this conversation even at the county level in regards to the fact that, you know, Manistee's identity is changing. We're not a blue-collar factory town. We do have blue-collar factory workers, which is great, and it's a great base. However, we are now evolving into a retirement community and a tourism community.
And a destination.
So we have to look at, you know, through tourist eyes, and so for tourist eyes, I would say, you know, and my district is here, and I always say this to our county meetings too, downtown is the heartbeat of this county. If the heartbeat stops, the county goes down, because anybody who comes to our county is going to look at, what do we have? And so, you know, walking through the district with those eyes, because you would say, well, that's not in the budget, so we'll try next year. Where I would say, you know what, that piece of it has to get done, because people walk on it every day and they're going to look at it. Those benches look terrible. So when we pull them out this year, let's clean them up first. You know, and that seems like a really small thing, but I look at them every single time I walk by. But from a maintenance point of view, it's like, you know, I would rather have people down at First Street trying to manage the fish station or something, you know, because that's my priority right now, because all the fishermen are coming in. So it's constantly being able to balance that and look at it with a budgetary eyes, and, you know, for us, this destination or retirement type of eyes too.
I think you're 100% correct. That's almost the exact conversation that Stacy and Kyle and I had a little over a month ago, is that we can't be satisfied with the way it's been. We're changing. There's development coming, there's more people coming, and we have to grow with that. And so I think these are very positive conversations.
Can I just say real quick? I want to go back to what Ed said and kind of mirror, you know, those segments about maybe getting together once a month, walking around, pointing out these things, but then have a more in-depth conversation of where we can allocate time for maintenance and money. But then maybe the DDA can get back to doing what I signed up to do on the DDA, and that's for business development. And I don't want to be in maintenance, those are other people that do that. So I would say that going forward, if we could put something on the books maybe once a month for those that have more of a keen eye to what is wrong or what is perceived to be wrong with a river walk or plants or anything like that, get together once a month and just point those things out and then see what we can do, if we can allocate some time, some manpower, and some funding for that. That's where I would be. Go ahead, Brent.
So to add to that, you know, being part of that walkthrough with Kyle, and I remember Jody was there, you know, those things as you walked, you know, I sat quietly behind and just no. And even some of those things we've seen were probably done within that first 15 minutes after we walked by, because it is a hole in a walkway. You're absolutely right. Safety, that should be priority. And we did see some of those as we walked along, and within that hour time frame, they were rehabbed to that measure. But going through, Kyle, we pulled through, and there's those, I'll call them evergreen bushes, where we wanted the benches. You know, in those discussions, I hear this: you don't like them, they're ugly. You were like, well, they weren't pruned properly. I'm not a green thumb, so I just hear it. By the end of it, you want them pulled, yep, and put some bench pads, right?
Yeah.
That's where we left it. Now, I know my wife wouldn't appreciate mulch and bench pads. She'd like some petunias, or I don't need perennials, but we don't, it's that collaboration of what you're saying. Absolutely right, the maintenance part, hey Brandon, fix that. No problem. You gotta tell me what to plant though, right? It's those things we fall short of, where there's a green space of mulch sitting by the fish station at Manistee in a marina. Absolutely, it's bare. Some people don't like that look. Totally agree with that. But the direction of what to put in there, we can put it. But then the opinion of the group becomes, well, why'd you do that? Because we even think, who put those evergreens there? That's just crazy, right? If we had that direction, those things are fully accomplishable in our department. Inside of that, dude, I don't want to tell you to fix that board. Like I want to put more buildings in. Absolutely, but those walkthroughs help that discussion and those planning for us to do that, you know. And it's hard with the amount of people we have. I think it's fair. I know everybody's heard it in this room. There's 2 guys in the Parks Department. Ms. Greavy, you said how many hours do you have total now?
I'm not sure. It's over 500.
5 just alone, or with the group?
With the group.
So with the group, we'll say 5 to 10 people?
No, it's typically 1 to 3.
1 to 3, so 3, that's 1,500 hours of work.
No, it's 500 total.
Oh, so each one of you got like 150 of the hours? Right, so if we did that with our parks kids, 3 people, that's half our parks that we hired this year, allocated to what the great job she's done, the benches. You know, everything looks great, but that's half our department for 13 other parks in the city that we're chasing, 14, excuse me, that we're chasing the public that says, you're just catering to the tourists, what about Mac Park or Morton Park? And what about this at this park? We hear those things every day.
You
And
guys got
it's tough. It's tough, and it's not an excuse. It's just the challenge to meet.
And I'd like to make a comment, because one of the areas that we looked at was that butterfly garden.
Yep.
And of concern to me is to say, well, we're having this discussion, well, who's doing what? Or as you rightfully point out, yeah, we'll pull the bushes out, but we need to know what goes back in. And in the meantime, we're saying, okay, well, can we have a group take over this area and perhaps maintain it? Well, where is this group that's supposed to be doing it?
Jeff Payne.
Yeah.
But
God
you see what
bless
I'm
his
saying?
soul.
I mean, that's what I heard when we were there walkthrough,
Yeah.
was that there was no maintenance of it.
Yep.
And so it just, I mean, I think that when we reach out to these people, if there are some, that want to adopt these areas, then there has to be an expectation that, okay, you made this commitment.
So you think of all those things, and then add
But
those.
you can't count on that.
No, we
Well,
can't
that's-
rely on that.
That's what my concern is, right?
And the
Is that
idea is-
that the middle ground maybe is to say, adopt a space.
You have a
Well,
group that adds
can we expect
evergreen bushes just because they want it. Well, there's not one guy we have that knows how to properly trim an evergreen bush. And that's not a qualification to hire.
Sure.
It's just,
So there's no one who's, getting, a consistent level of input from volunteers and, getting it, that requires administrative time. And always have a volunteer coordinator who would call up the person who is responsible for an area and say, are you still there? You know, because that's not on your list of things to do, right? You know, you don't have a Rolodex full of, you know, people to call when, okay. So there's an administrative part of this that we can look into. The walkthrough is a tremendous improvement in process. Again, I come back to the asset management, you know, and the maintenance plan. And there has to be a way, as we're improving this process, to draw in the opinions of the community as we're doing this, right? And not waiting for them to explode in frustration. You know, that incorporated into walkthroughs, which makes their way into planning, which gets back into the budget process. I agree, it's frustrating that people don't show up at the budgeting meeting, but most people would rather chew off their arm than sit through a budgeting meeting, right? But if you can get their input on walkthroughs and stuff, then you can budget for it, right?
I think there's like 2 levels we talk, or even 3 levels we talk about. You know, it's like I haven't mentioned Brandon, but I hear great things. You know, you are on, you know, you are on it. You take care of it. It's quick. You know, it's done right. So it's like we have the responsive side where we will take care of things that you want us to take care of. Give us the direction, and we will do it. That comes across very clear. But we need maybe somebody who is like a volunteer coordinator / beautification type of worker who can walk the Riverwalk and design. You know, somebody who comes downtown and can design so that we don't have to have the, you know, it's not a burden, but, you know, have all these discussions on, you know, should we have black trash can, or should we paint them brown, or should they be, you know, Victorian red, you know, all that stuff. You'd rather run your business or see business development than, you know, whether or not the trash cans are Victorian red. However, the beautification person or the volunteer person would say that is very important because, and we all know visually people, you know, and I had this conversation out at the airport, you know, it's like we need to improve our appearance, and people who find us appealing will stay. They'll spend their money, they'll be interested in us. So there's like different levels. You know, you very much are the, tell me what to do and I will do it and I'll do it right. But over here, it's like, well, what do we do? I mean, the whole Riverwalk, you're right. I walk through there and I kind of go, well, those plants shouldn't be there and they should be there. We should do, you know, and why would they plant this here? Because there's also safety issues. Some of these things get so big that, you know, in a dark spot on the Riverwalk, that's not safe. So all of those aspects, I have to be maybe one person or, you know, or that combination of a job
Sorry.
No, it's all right. Go ahead.
I just want to suggest, so I don't want to tell you, I really don't want to tell anybody how to do their jobs, but we've talked about this before. But maybe just consider hiring a landscape contractor for very defined things, general maintenance on a weekly basis, because I think it would significantly relieve you and your staff to do things that you agree you're good at, and some things you're not as good at, you know, like pulling trees or pulling bushes and fixing things and responding to emergencies. Whereas if we have a landscape contractor to do some defined things, they're accountable to that, and that's one less thing you guys have to deal with, and it may require less seasonal employees. So I know you and I have talked about this before, but I just, if that could at least be put on the table and considered as an option, because I think that would, you know, blowing out the sidewalks and the Riverwalk entrances and the Riverwalk every week, we would just know you don't have to deal with that. It's done, and they're accountable for that. So just a thought.
If I might, I've got a few things I think that I heard come out of this, which I think is important. Karen, you mentioned pavers. You were opposed to those when they went in because of the situation that we have now. So I look at some of the retaining walls that were built that are they're built of wood, they're at the end of their useful life. So you can maintain, at some point you have to replace. If the city / DDA had a lot of money, or more money, or maybe even a little more forward looking at the time those were built, they probably would have built them a sheet pile. Would it have raised the cost significantly? Yeah, but you'd never, ever, ever have to worry about them. So when we're developing these plans, we're looking at improving, taking out bushes and putting back in some kind of landscaping. I think we always need to take a look at and be cognizant of the trade-off between the current cost and the life cycle cost of maintaining this stuff. To the extent that we can have attractive, low-maintenance items, we ought to do that. So as an example, the benches have been coming up. And Jeff has shown me pictures of a new bench. Here it is 2 years later, and it looks like it's 100 years old.
3 years.
3 years, because it's exposed to the elements. So I've reached out to Mark Fetter, and I haven't heard back from him, so I need to follow up with him again about what is the potential of putting composite materials in those benches around, for example, like the deck down here, for example, things like that, where you don't have to worry about them deteriorating. And if we can do that, it's worth spending a little bit more money because it saves hours and hours and hours of maintenance. Now, there's going to be some people that say, oh my gosh, it's the Victorian community, it's downtown, it's not historic, all of that, but you have to have a reasonable balance. And I just bring that up because I think as we're looking to go into new bonding and perhaps doing some things, we always need to keep an eye on what can we do that's low maintenance, that's still going to look nice, even if it costs a little bit more, because it's going to save you money and grief in the long run. So there's that. I will say at the west end of the Riverwalk, the city's going to do a little pilot project with putting on composite materials on that section of the Riverwalk. How many linear feet is it?
110 feet.
110 feet. Doesn't seem like a lot. It adds a significant amount of cost because you have to beef up the infrastructure so it doesn't sag. But I think it's worth it, particularly in that area where it's difficult to get equipment to clean. It may hold up better. So we're going to try that and see how that works. And if it's successful, there's areas down here that, some of those boards are going to have to be replaced at that point in time, depending on how the Riverwalk is built. And Jeff did point out that there's 3 or 4 different types of construction. Some has dirt under it, some of it's cantilevered, some of it's hybrid. So there's different things you can and can't do with the surface, but maybe you replace those boards with composite. Or maybe where they're dirt, you replace them compacted and put colored concrete that's lower maintenance. So those are things we just need to be keeping in mind. Second thing is in terms of future planning, we've talked with the city engineer about putting together a more formal asset management plan for the Riverwalk, and we're going to have more conversations, but I think that's something that we're going to have them do, because I think it's important enough to the community that it's worth that, and then it can lay out for everybody to see what the costs are to bring this up to the standards that the community's wanting. And finally, we do have some projects that are going to go on that are going to help to improve the Riverwalk. The Gateway project, more than likely, will have a brownfield plan associated with it, but this board's going to have to approve giving up their tax capture for it, so there's going to be involvement here from the DDA. But public infrastructure can be part of those brownfield plans, and part of that can be to renovate that particular section of the Riverwalk that's in need of repairs. It definitely is. So there's some of those things that are coming together. The plaza out here is going to happen. So some of that reconstruction, redevelopment of the Riverwalk is going to happen naturally. It may not be happening at the pace that people want it, but there's certainly plans for it. We talked about the north side of the river at the council meeting last night. The city let a bond and has money sitting there waiting to do that project. We were hoping to match it with a grant. The trust fund grant didn't get funded, so now the question is, okay, do we do a smaller project, or do we go back to the trust fund with an enhanced project that maybe can score better? But at some point, there is money there to do that project, and something will get done there. It may not be the scope or the scale that we were anticipating, but it's not like that isn't recognized that that's a problem and that there aren't plans to address it, but things can't always happen at the pace that maybe the community wants it. So I think there's a lot of forward momentum, and I think this meeting is really helpful, and I think we'll continue to go forward and plot a path forward.
And tell the community that, it's like like for that, and that was the last meeting we had a conversation about that side, and it's really getting dangerous in some areas. I'm getting older, and I myself stumbling down those steps every once in a while. I can't take it as fast as I used to, but it's just the thing of just that communication with oh, I understand now. You've got this fund, but I understand about matchings and trying to get those extra fundings, and the process you have to go through basically is sell your life to match them up. But
It's a
if we could have-
$450,000 project.
Yeah, and if we could have better,
Which
you know,
one
just
is that?
communication that we're
The North
looking at
River
it,
Walk.
we know that we want to do it, but this is what's holding us back. And then, you know, other people are like, it's like, oh, I'm thinking, well, geez, I wonder what the foundation could be in this. If we, you know, if we added some things to that, would the foundation come up with some money? Because it does enhance the lifestyle of Manistee. I mean, it falls right in their mission. So, you know, just thoughts like that, so that other people.
Communication is always a huge challenge, and I would challenge everybody sitting around this table and in the audience to help spread that message, because we can have public meetings, we can put it on Facebook, we can put it on the webpage, we can have newspaper articles, and I guarantee you, 80% of the town has no idea, because A, they don't care, because they just expect it to get done, or B, they've got other concerns, they're busy with their family, recreating or whatever. So the more that we can have word of mouth, the better it is. And I think we all need to be advocates for the planning process that it has gone on behind the scenes that nobody is aware of, because that's really, I mean, it's in the budgets, it's in the capital improvement plans, it's discussed, but if you don't watch the meetings or attend them, you're not going to know that. And it's hard to communicate information to people that don't really care, right? But I think the more we can do word of mouth, the better we're off we're going to be.
Can we schedule a walkthrough right now? Why not? What do you think?
Yep.
Okay. What, morning or evening? Morning, okay. What time do you guys start?
I would rather you set the temperature of the day than the time of day.
No
Will they
rain.
go out 5 a.m.?
70 degrees, I'm good anytime.
I'll get that at 5. When do you guys start?
7 a.m.
7. Is 7:30 too early? Okay. Next week sometime?
Sure.
At 7:30.
Tuesday?
Tuesday is the worst day for Ed and I.
I'm going to be out of town on Tuesday. Taking my daughter to college.
Yeah, no.
Well, is there a
I don't need
staff?
to be there if you guys are there.
Yeah.
If there's not a staff meeting, then I would be available.
You're excused from the staff meeting.
That's Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday, would you rather be at the staff meeting?
Oh,
I won't be at the staff meeting, probably canceling it anyway, so Tuesday's good, Jim.
Okay. Thanks, Jay. We'll send out an email.
OT.
What's that, Tim?
You said Tuesday at 7:30?
John?
That would be fine.
Okay.
There's
You
a
send out a
merchant
note?
meeting still on that too.
What's that?
There is a merchant meeting at 8:30, so I'll
On
have to.
Tuesday? Okay.
So I'll just have to.
Is this a DDA walkthrough or just the river walk?
Let's just do the river walk, because we lose people and it just gets busy too long to do the entire thing. Kelly?
Can the public attend as well?
Sure. Well, I mean, we don't want 100 people, but yeah, if there's a few key people, absolutely. I can't say no, but it's really a discussion between.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Don't put it in the paper. I'm just kidding.
Yes, I will send out a note.
Okay.
And then Kelly, I will.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, me too.
I can bring coffee. Remind me to bring coffee.
I'm just kidding.
We can meet at the outpost, I'll provide coffee. I think I still know how to make it.
Last time you said you were buying lunch and that didn't happen.
Right. He did say that.
Was it lunch or drink?
Point of order.
It started with lunch and ended with drinks.
Yeah. This has been a good discussion.
Yes.
Thank you, and everybody that's participated, Brandon and Jeff. And let's keep doing it by doing the walkthrough next week, and we should review this monthly, I think. But I want to keep this positive, and it can go negative quick, but we're not going to get anywhere if we go negative. So let's try to keep it moving forward.
Kyle, can I provide one last
Please.
little update before the next agenda? So I met with Sean Middleton, the city's engineer, and he was crawling around all underneath the switchback and the handicap accessible stuff. And he's got some preliminary stuff that he needs to talk to Jeff about, but just know that that's being looked at. It has been looked at and been monitored, but
Yeah.
there's some issues there that are of immediate need, but there's longer term issues that are gonna have to be addressed, so that's what he's gonna be looking at.
Is this specifically by the barber shop?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and actually, when I, again, do a lot of I do that too. ADAs, but it's like, I look at that whole ramp process and I kind of go, really? This is accessible? I mean, according to the current.
How old is that Ram truck? Do you remember when that was built? Was it built as part of the Riverwalk?
Yeah, it's 30 years
It's
old.
got, yeah, because it looks like an older version.
So Jeff, or Sean had some insights that we have a monthly engineering meeting that we're gonna add that to the agenda and take a look at. But he's gonna be writing something up, but he needs to discuss it with you first, so.
Yeah, I'm gonna meet with him this morning, yeah.
Yeah, I look at the ones down here and it's like, yeah, those are, you know, the moderate kind of, but that one is like, I
And
can
the-
just see it got two wheels.
With our partnership with the college, they're putting in one here as well, so.
Okay, good, good, good,
Be
good.
really nice.
Excellent.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Just in general, I have a question. So I attended the design committee meetings on a monthly basis, and when I started to do those, actually it was your fault, but I found that there was a lot of topics that interacted or interfaced with what Public Works is doing. So what is the best way for me to communicate now with the board since that group is gone?
The intention really, and I've been meaning to get with it, I've been busy as well, but the intention wasn't to not have those discussions. I just felt like that was a good time to reset, get rid of these subcommittees, and let's decide what the best way is.
Yeah, I just don't want to lose touch.
I agree.
I mean,
Yeah.
those things are of
That-
importance to both parties, so.
That wasn't my intention, and I really just wanted to bring this discussion to the board level, because we talk about it so much at the design committee level, but I think having the entire board involved is important, and then we as a board need to decide, okay, what's on a more regular basis, what is the best way? So I'm open to ideas.
Well, and I thought of it, Mr. Allen, when Mr. Allen said, you know, who's conveying, not necessarily asset management, but who's conveying the plan to move forward, and that's been my route is, you know, X, Y, and Z, we're gonna need to start thinking about that in the next couple of years, and so we've had those discussions, laid those things out. Just one update for you. The yield signs
Oh, yeah.
for the crosswalks, the link that you sent me is exactly what we
Okay,
had arrived at. I mean, literally exactly.
okay.
The company that we had found, their rep doesn't carry them in Michigan. So we reached out to the company of the link that you found, and we're trying to get a rep to
We're
give us
hoping we don't get
prices.
the same rep back. That's fingers crossed what we did.
All right, thank you.
But we haven't stopped on that, so.
Okay.
Kind of, we want to ask Jeff to attend these, the DDA meetings for the next couple of months.
I don't think I asked that.
I thought that would be a great way for the board to know. What do you think?
But whatever way you think is best to keep that discussion
I'd be
going.
more than happy to put you on the agenda for monthly meetings if you want to attend. I understand if you can't, but generally they don't take this long. Generally they're under an hour.
Yeah.
And I think,
We could, you know, put you on the beginning of the agenda
Yeah.
and then just show
and if we're trying to improve the communication flow and the exchange of information, we want to involve the whole board again, so everybody, I think that's really important.
Thanks, boss. That'd be fine.
Invitation extended.
Let's add it to the next agenda.
Okay, shall we move on? Okay, thank you all again. Bond discussion. We need to do it. I wanted to have this meeting first. We did try to schedule something, but we're ready. So Christine is going to try to send out another.
Vacations have gotten in the way, I think.
Well, I reached out to both our financial advisor and our bond counsel, and I have quite a bit of information to share in terms of scheduling and timelines, so I can send that out once we get a meeting scheduled, and people can review it. And, you know, depending on when we get started and how long that preliminary process takes, once you basically hit a certain threshold, it's a pretty defined process, but that preliminary stuff is what's still
Okay.
there.
Okay. Yeah, let's schedule a session
Sign up for that.
Public comment. Thanks again for coming. None? Board member comments? Okay. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Karen. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it.